Hey guys, welcome back to Maelstrom Gaming Studios. I'm Craig, and today we are going to go over the results of the GT, the Renegade Open that I went to this past weekend, 2 weekends ago for you guys. If you didn't check out the video on my list more in depth, that'll be up here. Check that out first if you want to go back and see what I brought for this event, why I brought it, some of those details. But if you're all caught up to date, then we will dive into everything about my games, how I performed in the tournament, where I thought everything shook up. Do I change my list? Things like that going forward. So if that all sounds good, do like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our content here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios. And if you want to help support the channel just a little bit more, we do have an Etsy shop. You can buy some tokens for your various faction armies to keep track of command phase buffs and things like that. And we do have memberships. You can do as little as $1 and all the way up from there just to support us as sort of a thank you, and certain tiers do get content back in return. Now, with all that out of the way, let's dive into today's video. So this was a 64 player event. I think technically it might have been 65 and then one of the guys dropped partway through, whatever case may be. 64 players, so we did end up with 2 undefeated players. If you were watching, there were 5 rounds that were streamed on Wargames Live. Unfortunately, I was not one of them. I was really hoping to get onto it, but just not this time, maybe next year, or if I go to any other big tournaments that he's at, I will try my best to get on those ones. Either way, this was a 5-round event with 64 players. That did mean 2 people did go undefeated. I was not one of them, spoilers right now to say, but the list did really well. So again, quick recap of my list. We had the Flyant with the Reaper, Tervagon, Neurothrop as the HQs, 2 groups of Warriors and a group of Termagants, 2 groups of Zoanthropes, Venomthropes, Tyrant Guard, 2 individual Pyrovores, 2 units of Raveners with Death Spitters and Rending Claws, and 3 Biovores. So again, that other video puts more in depth here, but we will just dive into how my games went. So first off, I had game 1. It was a Tyranid, I'd say mirror matchup, but not totally mirror matchup because our lists were fairly different. He was going for a Leviathan Spore Mine spawning spam list, so taking the Spore Mines to the extreme here. He had Biovores, he had a Sporocyst, he had 2 Harpies. He was playing in Leviathan with a big block of 30 Gaunts, just really sinking in 5 up Feel No Pain, 5 up Invo and Save into that unit just to keep them going all day long. He had a Tervagon, Tyrant, all sorts of things. And normally, you know, on day 1, you get there early. At least I like to get there early with some of my friends. And we walk around and see what people's armies are bringing. And we kind of point out, ooh, that one would be scary. Oh, I think I could take that. I don't want to play that. And this was one army I did not want to play. At least not right away. And my buddy joked like, hey, I need you to play him and beat him so I don't have to play him later on. And unfortunately, round 1, I did get matched up with him. He is a very good player. He's always been at this tournament and others right up there towards the top of the leaderboard. So I knew this wasn't going to be an easy game. It was going to be an uphill battle. Unfortunately, it did not go my way as it was a 72-75 loss. It came down to pretty much he used the stratagem Endless Swarm for the Tyranids to respawn Gaunts from his unit of Termagants. He needed a 5+ to spawn enough Termagants to finagle his way onto the objective, denying me 4 primary points. He got the 5+, and yeah, that was pretty much the game right there. Did we know it was going to come down to that when it happened? We knew it would be pretty dang close and that would be a big swing point, but when we added it up at the end, yes, that was the deciding factor. Not only did it take out one of my primary points, it also took off one of my banners, so yeah, unfortunately I lost out 4 points there in the end. 5 points if you count the end. So yeah, could have been my game had that roll been smaller. MVP of this game was definitely the Turvagon. She avenged her babies. Turn 1, the Harpies both flew up. They had these Stranglethorn cannons and just decimated my group of Gaunts right away off the bat. So she got her revenge in turn 3, 4, and 5. Just went on an absolute tear, dropping Venom Thropes, dropping Warriors, dropping Zone Thropes, Gaunts, just on an absolute tear. And she did pretty well with the Psychic secondary interrogation, even with Tyranids being annoying at denying it. So overall, really, really sucked to have him be my first game opponent, because that was by far the hardest game. I shouldn't say by far, but it was my hardest game of the weekend. It just sucked that the randomness happened, that we played each other turn 1, because in losing that game turn 1, denied me the chance to be going on stream, because they only wanted undefeated Tyranid players on the stream, just because there were a lot of us. So it sucked that it happened that way. I wish I had that one, but you know what? We live and we move on to the next game, and that's what we did. And we played, and you're seeing this right, another Tyranid player. He was playing another Leviathan list. It's a pretty balanced list. Some Carnifexes, he had your Flyer Ant with a Shard Gullet, which was an interesting choice, but it worked out for him. Gaunts, Hormagaunts, and some Termagants. Warriors, Venonthropes, pretty balanced. He did tell me he was a newer player, at least to Tyranids, and this was what he got painted for the event, so this is what he brought. When I heard that, I figured, okay, it's probably not the scariest list, and me knowing Tyranids, I could see what he was trying to go for a game plan, and I was able to kind of work around that. I took Interrogation, Banners, and No Prisoners, and the only reason I didn't get 100 points is because it was impossible for me to get a max 15 on No Prisoners. Otherwise, it was pretty much a clean sweep off the board right there. I got turn 1. I didn't do much with it. I just kind of set up some defensive buffs, put up some banners, and set myself up to prepare for the next turn. A fun little thing happened there is the game was pretty much in my favor by the end of 3, but I charged in my Flyer into a Shard Gullet Tyrant, and he tanked every single invuln save that I got, which was 4 or 5 of them out of him, and then the Shard Gullet Tyrant shot in melee with the Shard Gullet and just dropped my Hive Tyrant, just decimated him. So that was unfortunate to see that happen. We avenged him. We got the Hive Tyrant with the Raveners, came up and took him out, but sad to see the Hive Tyrant go that way. For me, the game, like I said, he's a newer player, so at least to the Tyranids, and my list was there to kind of kick butt. So it was still a great opponent and everything, but the Raveners were definitely the MVP. They put out a lot of banners between the two of them, used them offensively to drop a couple units, snuck all the way to his back line, took his back objective, which was good for the mission, and yeah, pretty easy one there. But 2 games in a row versus Tyranids, so we had the joke saying, all right, I have to play every Tyranid player. Didn't quite happen. Game 3, we played Creations of Bile. Now, I've never played against them. I've watched a few games and kind of read up on what Creations of Bile did, and it was a little nerve-wracking to go. However, when the game came into it, his list, let's talk about his list. So he had a beautiful army, first off. It won best overall painting-wise. So that's, I guess, best painted, not best overall. It won best painted, so it did really well. He had a Lord Discordant, 10-man Terminator block, all converted models, really cool. Converted Venom Crawlers, 12 Possessed, Bikers, Cultists, just Legionnaires, all sorts of stuff. For secondaries for me, No Prisoners, I could max it out against his army without even killing everything, so that was an easy one to take. Psychic Interrogation, he did have a Demon Prince and a Master of Possessions, so there were models who could deny me, but I was able to kind of work around them, and I didn't have any issue there. And Cranial Feasting, he had 4 characters and then unit champions galore, so it was a pretty obvious one for me to pick. I really went into the whole, let's just fight in the middle and kill. So that went well. It was an absolute bloodbath. Models were being slain. Vehicles or creatures were exploding, lashing out. Death everywhere. He did have a few bad rolls that were like, oh, this, like you needing a 4-inch charge and rolling double snake eyes or something like that. Not things like that just, he had a few of them that really just didn't help him. He had his Venom Crawler explode because they exploded on a 5+, and then exploded and did the remaining 2 wounds to his Lord Discordant and then killed that one outright. So that was unfortunate. Luckily for me, I'd already maxed out Cranial Feasting from that by then, but still, just things that did not go his way. It came down to pretty much I deployed and had a better game plan, I think, than him. It was the one where we have objective, and then 2 objectives, and then 2 objectives. So I kind of had this triangle, and he had that triangle, and I had deployed, it was player placed terrain, if I didn't mention that already. I just set up my terrain in a way where I could kind of hold my objectives and then go after and tag one of his and pull it back. With banners being, I didn't play with banners on this one, did I? No, I thought I did. It was a good one to take banners. He had banners and he was farming some points on those ones. But Flyrant was the MVP. I think the Raveners did a great job just kind of distracting and chewing up chaff and stuff. But the Flyrant dropped the Demon Prince. He dropped most of the Terminators, going for between the Mortal Wound strat that took out 2 of them. Then he charged in and killed another like 6 of them or 5 of them or something. And then I had small arms fire to deal with the other ones. And then he could fall back and hide. And then he went in after Possessed and he just slashed and killed. And Flyrant was definitely MVP. Zoanthropes did great with their smites, as they always do. But yeah, it just came down to, I think I had a little bit of a better game plan of how to attack his army than he had. He had only played Tyranids once. Now granted, it was in round 1 and it was a very similar list to mine. But he just, didn't have quite the plan to attack my army. And I was able to use the terrain to my advantage just a little bit more than him. Overall, good game. And the Tyranids won there 91-65. I think the only points I missed out on were primary points because there was a lot of 8 scoring primary, so I missed out on a couple primary points for that. But other than that, it was a maxed out game there. Then we go into game 4. This is day 2, and I am playing another Tyranid player. I know, more Tyranids. This was a Behemoth Monster Mash list. I have played against this opponent before with a very similar list, so luckily I had a game plan in my mind of how to go against it. His list consisted of 3 Maleceptors, 2 Tyrants, 2 Fexes, a Trigon, Warriors, Zoanthropes, Neurothrope, Biovores. Really playing into the Monster Mash part of it though. My secondaries, obviously Bring It Down was a good one to take there. Banners, this was an option. Wasn't the greatest objective for it, but it was one where I'd set up in a way where if I held my 2 objectives the whole game as 10 points, and I thought later rounds I could go ping out. And against his army, there weren't really any good options, so I thought banners was a safe one. And then I went for Warp Ritual, seeing that he had 7 denies or something in his army. I figured I probably would only get 2 Psychic Interrogations off, so I went with Warp Ritual instead because it's 1 extra point to get 2 Warp Rituals off versus 2 Psychic Interrogations. The 1 point didn't really matter in the end, but that was the thought process behind it there. I think 2 things came down to me winning this game. The first one and the most important one is I played my Synaptic Imperatives perfectly. I think out of all of the games I've ever played with Tyranids, I have not had a game line up better than they did against him. So turn 1, I didn't go for an imperative. Just the way the terrain was, I didn't think I was going to get any action. Turn 2, I went for the 5-up Feel No Pain against Psychic, and then the +1 to cast and deny. And the reason I did that was his 3 Maleceptors had moved forward, and I deployed my Gonsamway, so they were going to take the brunt of all of the Maleceptor bonus smites or whatever, synaptic explosions. I don't remember what they're called, but you know, the psychic bonus mortals. They're going to take the brunt of that. All the other psychic powers, I had positioned myself, so I had +1 to deny. I really shut down a psychic phase that turn, and whatever psychic powers he did get off, I got mortals against it, so I really limited the damage that happened that turn. Then I went for the +2 to move and everything. Well, later that turn, then my Zoanthropes were able to move into position. They all got +1 to cast, so they got +4 to cast in their smites. They just decimated models with the smites. Got my, did I get Warp? I didn't get a Warp Ritual off that turn, but I got smites. I got Paroxysms off, and yeah, it was perfect. The other one would be the 4-up Invone on my Tervigon. From Warp Shielding, I timed it out right, so I believe it was turn 4 I used that one. I think it was turn 4 where he sent his Hive Tyrant into, or no, he sent a Maleceptor into my Tervigon. Luckily I had the Invone so I could shrug him off on top of Catalyst and then beat up the Maleceptor, killing it, finishing it off. And then I sent the Tervigon into his Hive Tyrant, was able to wall his Hive Tyrant while I still had the Invone on, do most of the damage to it, and then my following turn just finish off with smites. So overall, the Tervigon was probably the MVP, but I mean, the Zoanthropes, they did so much damage with smites that game, but the Tervigon able to wall 2 of his monsters with the Invone and Catalyst obviously was a big factor there. Overall, it was a good game. I had a few lucky rolls, with the Tervigon walling off my opponent, and allowed me to win that game. So then we go into game 5, and then when I found out I was playing this army, I knew, because if you watch the stream from the Renegade Open stream, game 3, which is the last round of the first day, this Imperial Knight army played the only remaining undefeated Tyranid army and absolutely decimated him. Not a chance for the Tyranids, unfortunately. Tyranid player did what he could, but the Knight player just slapped him around like it was nobody's business. So I was a little worried, knowing I was going up against this list. However, again, I think through playing player place terrain, allowing me to position myself with the objectives, and one huge crucial roll, I was able to swing out a victory, an 89-59 win here. So his list consisted of 2 big knights. So he had a paladin and then one other big scary knight with guns and stuff. Sorry, I don't know what they are. He had seven baby knights, 2 autocannon boys. I say autocannon because that's what they are. They're the knight autocannon. He had 3 slashy ones and 2 of the Moraxes with the lightning lock guns, I think is what they were. Scary stuff. But through positioning terrain, it came to a sense of he had to get to the center of the board to do one of his actions to get him victory points every turn. I was able to put my Hive Tyrant in a position where if he went to do that action on that turn, my Hive Tyrant could fly up, slice down a knight, and then use Overrun to fall back behind and then be safe. It really came down to me just holding objectives in the corner, the 3 objectives in the corner, and then toying with one of the objectives on his side of the map over and over again. But to that roll that really changed it all, it was he had 2 knights in the center, one on an objective, one in the middle doing his action. Between smites and shooting and all that stuff and spore mines, the one on the objective I brought down to 3 wounds. And the one in the middle was at 9 wounds or something like that. The Hive Tyrant flew in there, sliced down that knight. It exploded and then did 3 mortal wounds to the knight who only had 3 wounds left, blowing it up. and then making it so my opponent only was holding 2 objectives on a 6 objective game. He only got 4 primary points. Then, because of that, it was kind of like a domino effect. He had to sacrifice more knights to the center of the board to get onto that objective. And I just rinsed and repeat, going down, slice, back. He did get his revenge on my Flyrant, as he put in 4 invuln save this time on the knight in the middle. Between smites and stuff, I brought it down. I really only needed to do, between the mortals and stuff with the Reaper, I needed him to fail. I needed to do 3 wounds and him to fail 1 invuln save, and that would have killed off the knight. He did make all 5 or whatever of his invuln saves, and then in his round of swinging back, actually, he didn't swing back. Swing back didn't do any damage. Maybe 3 wounds or 4 wounds, I don't know what it was, not much, but he fell back. Then all the guns shot the Hive Tyrant, and then is like back. It was a brutal game. As we were joking and saying, we were throwing haymakers at each other every single turn. Something important was dying. The judge was watching us for part of it, and we're just like, oh man, this turn, it's like, oh, I gave him the game because of this, and then came back, it's like, oh no, I gave it back to him, and then I gave it back to him. So it was a really fun game. We both played pretty cagey. Unfortunately for my opponent, he played too cagey. I think he was really scared of my Raveners, and honestly, they didn't do anything all game. It came down to the very end where I used them as a wall to prevent the knight from getting to my objective, which could have potentially got him a ton of points if he got to it. It was 2 big knights came forward. He hit him way back in the corner because he wanted to try and deny me Psychic Interrogation, which he did do for 2 turns. He denied me the Psychic Interrogation. Thinking about that in the long run, maybe I should have done Warp Ritual, but if I did Warp Ritual, he probably would have been more aggressive with his knights. So, you know, things happen. Big knights come walking up, had to get at my objective. I made a wall of Raveners, then I made a wall of Venom Thropes, then I made a wall of Spore Mines, and then a wall of Termagants. So if he really wanted to get on the objective, he'd have to go through the fight last and some mortal wounds from the Venom Thropes, and then the Raveners could chew on him, and then he'd have to get through all the Spore Mine mortal wounds, and then he'd have to get through all the Termagants, and then toe on the objective. That all happened in like turn 4, or my 5, so he would have easily been able to do it had he had enough turns, but at that time he didn't have enough turns to do it. We talked at the end, and he was saying he thought he was probably a little bit too scared of the Raveners, and he was worried that I was going to zip my Flyrant out there and drop one of his big knights, just go all in. And I was telling him, hey, next time you play Tyranids, a Flyrant, as good as they are, needs an almost perfect roll to drop one of the big knights in 1 turn of combat, which just not gonna happen, but it's close. The Zone Thropes were a close second. Man, those things, I was putting Catalyst on the Zone Thrope, sticking him out in the open and threatening my opponent to shoot him. I mean, he did shoot a lot of his guns into him, and they hung on, but I think between them, they probably did 12, 15 mortal wounds to knights just from smiting one after another after another. It was good stuff. Great game. His knights were beautiful, and yeah, so good game there. It was an 89-59 win.
Editing Craig here. After watching the playback of this, realized I didn't tell you guys how well I did in the overall tournament. So I'll tell you right here. Going 4-1 put me at 7th place overall in battle points. The Tyranid player who I lost to in the first round tied with me for battle points. So he got 6th, I got 7th because he beat me. And then overall, if you include hobby and paint points, as in terms of going for best overall, I came in 4th place. So all in all, a good result from the tournament there.
So if you've seen my videos before, we kind of go over how did the list fare. This list did really well. Quickly, you just see all the HQs deserve an A. They all had their time where they did what they needed to. They shine. They did well. I love them. Termagants, give them a B+. They did fine. They shielded my Turfgon as need to. Turfgon never died. They got me objectives. They raised banners. They just, the only time they didn't do what they needed to do was the first game against the Harpy, which just decimated them, which wasn't really on the Termagants, but it just, you know, Termagants were Termagants. The Warriors did fine. They did good. I missed having them at Strength 8 because I didn't have Adrenal Glands, but that's okay. They still provided Synaptic Links and killed a few things in melee. Yeah, holding a few objectives, raising some banners. Always good to have groups of warriors in your army. Venomthropes did really well. They were, especially against the Knight player, giving off that -1 to hit came up a lot. Some of the other models giving units fight last came up a lot. They did some actions. Killing that Parasite in the first game was awesome. So Venomthropes did really well, so I was happy with them. Tyrant Guard did what the Tyrant Guard needed to do. They shielded the Hive Tyrant. They killed a few things in melee, so I can't argue with them there. But yeah, I was happy with having Tyrant Guard. Zoanthropes, A+, absolutely. Overall, you saw my MVPs for each game. They were always a different unit, but if I had to give a overall MVP, it had to be both units of Zoanthropes. Well, putting the 3d6 casting on each of them, I mean, it was pretty common that they were both super smiting every single turn just with 3 Zoanthropes. The 3d6 picked the 2 highest plus 3 really allowed them to just wheel and deal mortal wounds all day long. All weekend long, really. So happy with the Zoanthropes. They could get a point increase coming up here in the future, but gosh, they're so good. Pyrovores actually did really well. Could I have got away with 1 Pyrovore? Probably. But having 2 of them, especially in those missions where you have to do an action or something on your home field objective, or you just need a unit to raise a banner on your home field objective and it can't be something else, having that simple little Pyrovore to just sit there, maybe screen out deep strikes, sit on that home objective or forward objective, yeah, yes, absolutely loved having the Pyrovores. Raveners did fine. They killed, they fought, they killed, they distracted, they stalled my opponent, everything you want out of a shock troop, and they're just tankier than most people's shock troops, so I can't argue with the Raveners really at all. And the Pyrovores, I give them a B+. They did fine. They spawned their Spore Mines. I think I'm still learning the best places to put Spore Mines all the time. I don't always have the best option. I do have some, I have some good placements, but not every turn I have a good option. There were a few times throughout the games where I just went for straight direct fire and every single time regretted it. So I could have played the Pyrovores better, but they definitely served their role throughout the tournament, laying down those trap cards, as I call them, in the Spore Mines. Just wrap it up here. I loved this list. I encourage anybody out there to try it. Maybe tweak it your own. It felt so good for me. It had the ability, why I love Kraken, is it had the ability to be fast if I needed to be aggressive on my opponent, if I needed to be cagey, work around the movement, knowing exactly when the best time is to use your synaptic imperatives to either, with a Turvagon, propel your fast attack or boost your psychic potential, give your invuln save. The nice thing about this one is that, yes, the Tyrant Guard and the Warriors and the Gaunts can benefit from, or most things can benefit from the invuln save. They're not really in a position where they need the invuln save. I mean, who doesn't want an invuln save? It's all around the Turvagon. When are you going to put her in harm's risk? And then you can play around that one. And because you can hide her behind a building, I often waited until turn 3 or 4 to send her out with an invuln, slash my opponent to pieces, take the brunt, and then there's not much left to deal with on the final turn she's alive. So loved having them around. But yes, the ability to play cagey, really toy with my opponent, hold my objectives, go get what I need to, and have that psychic power that the Tyranids do have is just phenomenal in the army. Yes, it's not Old One Eye, which is one of my favorite Tyranid models, but the Flyrant's just too good. I know I said the Old One Eye is great, but Flyrant is on another level, with the Reaper at least. Old One Eye is still good, but not the Flyrant. And really it's that overrun ability that makes the Flyrant absurd. If they didn't have it, whatever. The biggest flaw in this army is not mass tank, as I played against Knights and did fine against that. It's not against mass shooting. I can get up in people's grill pretty good. It's not horde. I have the volume of fire and the volume of attacks to deal with it. The biggest struggle, which I thankfully didn't have to deal with in tournament, but I do have to deal with playing Connor because he loves his Zarakin dynasty and his Grey Knights, is armies with Psychic Denial, like good Psychic Denial, and Feel No Pain versus Mortals. So the 3 armies that come to my mind, Grey Knights have a 5-up all the time, the Zarakin dynasty has a 5-up all the time, and the Custodes have a 4-up all the time. Those 3 armies, if you play against those often, you will struggle because your anti-tank is your Zoanthropes. A lot of it is your Zoanthropes, and if they can shrug 2/3 or half of your mortal wounds, it really does eat into the efficiency of your army. Another one that I didn't play against, thankfully, because I knew it would be a struggle, Sisters, being able to just deny psychic powers on a 5-up. They will also do very well against this army. Now, maybe you can kill them in melee, but the 2/3 chance just to shut down every single psychic power is just nasty to deal with. So thankfully didn't have to deal with that, but I can see them also being a serious threat to the army. Would I change anything with this army? Probably not, until there is a points adjustment coming in a month or 2, month and a half, month and a week or something. There'll be some points adjustments. The missions will change, probably, hopefully. Then I might make some tweaks to this, but for the time being, I stamp it on here saying this is a awesome list. I encourage everyone to try it. But if I did change something, it would be probably the Warlord trait on the Tervagon. Direct Guidance is awesome. Giving it to the Raveners normally. Sometimes I gave it to Tyrant Guard, sometimes I gave it to the Warriors, sometimes I gave it to the Gaunts to have Brood Progenitor and Direct Guidance on them. Means if I advanced, I could still shoot at max ballistic skill. If I had there was a -1 to hit, I could still shoot. It came up occasionally with the dense terrain and things like that. But putting adaptive biology on the Tervagon would allow me to be a little more aggressive with her, knowing she's got some second level of protection besides her just 2-up armor, toughness 8. No invuln. Having a Feel No Pain would help a lot. I could alternatively give that Feel No Pain to the Hive Tyrant if I wanted to. Heightened Senses would make her super powerful in melee, rerolling all hits and wounds with the Maw Claws is another option I thought about. I don't know if I didn't want to be greedy with the Tervagon. I wanted her to be more support. And then I could just not give her one and get an extra CP to start. There weren't many instances where I needed 1 extra CP throughout the game. I was pretty good about not blowing my CP throughout the rounds. There was 1 or 2 cases where it's always nice, but part of that also why I had so many CP is from Psychic Interrogation and from Cranial Feasting. Doing those almost always netted me a bonus CP every battle round from the games I played. So that helped a lot, keeping the CP coming throughout the round. But yeah, that's my list. Hopefully this video was informative to you, give you a little bit of insight on how I went throughout my tournament. Hopefully it wasn't too rambly. I'll try and cut it down, take out too much ramble in there. But yeah, just want to share it. Also, one more thing. If you do want me to show off, there were 7 other Tyranid players at the tournament. And I would argue probably 3 others. 2 or 3 others had really competitive lists, including the guy who beat me in the first round. If you want me to cover their list in a video and just show you what people are bringing, maybe to give you ideas, I will absolutely do that. Just put it down in the comments and I can get that video up for you soon. Otherwise, I think that's all we got today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios.